In the Pentagon, a quiet alarm is sounding, not of imminent attack, but of an arsenal being depleted at a shocking rate. Behind closed doors, military planners and defense officials are grappling with a reality few anticipated. The United States is burning through its missile reserves faster than at any point in recent history. The United States, long the world's military powerhouse, now faces a critical shortage of its most advanced missiles. Shelves that once brimmed with cutting-edge weaponry are now alarmingly bare, and the sense of unease is growing among those tasked with safeguarding the nation. Supporting allies in two intense wars while maintaining its own readiness has pushed U.S. stockpiles to the brink. Every shipment sent overseas, every convoy loaded with munitions, chips away at reserves meant for America's own defense. Systems like THAAD, Patriot, and Standard missiles are being used faster than they can be replaced, each launch leaving a gap that takes months or years to refill. The pace of consumption is relentless, and the industrial base is struggling to keep up. This slow-motion depletion raises urgent questions about America's ability to sustain its global commitments, or defend itself against a peer adversary. Military analysts warn that if the current trends continue, the U.S. could find itself unable to respond to new threats or fulfill promises to its partners. Decades of prioritizing high-tech over mass production and the belief that large-scale war was obsolete have left the U.S. unprepared for today's consumptive conflicts. Factories that once churned out missiles by the thousands now struggle to meet modern demand, hampered by supply chain issues and a lack of skilled labor. The rate of fire now far exceeds the rate of manufacture, creating a deficit that grows daily and undermines U.S. credibility with allies. Each day, the gap widens, and the challenge of rebuilding these stockpiles becomes more daunting. The once mighty arsenal of democracy is under strain, and fixing this shortage is now a top national security challenge. The question remains, can America's defense industry adapt quickly enough to restore its edge, or will the nation's military dominance become a relic of the past? The war in Ukraine marked the first major drain on U.S. missile stockpiles in decades, exposing vulnerabilities that had long been overlooked. As the conflict escalated, the U.S. found itself shipping out vast quantities of advanced munitions at a pace not seen since the Cold War. Thousands of Patriot and NASAMS interceptors were rushed to Ukraine, forming a critical shield against relentless Russian missile and drone attacks. Each shipment was a lifeline for Ukrainian cities, but also a subtraction from America's own reserves. Just as Ukraine's demands stretched U.S. reserves to the breaking point, a new and urgent front erupted in the Middle East, forcing American planners to split their focus and resources. Iran's massive coordinated drone and missile assault on Israel triggered a rapid U.S. response, as American forces scrambled to reinforce Israeli defenses and intercept incoming threats. U.S. naval destroyers, THAAD batteries, and air defense teams played a crucial role in Israel's defense, intercepting waves of missiles and drones, but every successful interception came at a steep cost to America's own inventory. The result? Missile stockpiles that were already low became dangerously depleted, with empty crates and launch tubes now a common sight at U.S. bases. Both conflicts rely heavily on expensive, high-tech interceptors, forcing the U.S. to make tough choices. Should it prioritize Kyiv's urgent needs, or focus on replenishing Middle East stocks? These are real-time decisions with life-or-death consequences for allies and U.S. interests alike. The U.S. defense industrial base, designed for peacetime and limited surges, was never built to support two simultaneous, high-intensity missile wars. Factories are running at full tilt, but output still lags far behind demand. The consequences of this shortfall are now painfully clear to military leaders and policymakers who must grapple with the reality of limited resources in a world of growing threats. The simple fact is that America cannot keep up with the soaring demand for advanced missiles, no matter how hard it tries. And as both conflicts continue, the strain on U.S. missile supplies is only growing, raising urgent questions about how long this pace can be sustained. The economics of this crisis are staggering. U.S. interceptors like THAAD and SM-3 cost millions per shot, sometimes over $18 million each, while adversaries use cheap drones costing thousands. In a single night defending Israel, A U.S. Navy ship might expend up to $196 million in missiles. The U.S. is winning tactically, but losing the financial war of attrition, spending millions to destroy weapons that cost a fraction to build. The defense of Israel alone cost over $800 million in THAAD interceptors, not counting Patriots or operational costs. These expenses strain the defense budget, forcing tough choices between replenishing munitions and investing in future systems. Manufacturing is slow and expensive, bottlenecked by specialized components and skilled labor. America's adversaries have found a way to impose massive costs simply by leveraging quantity over quality. THAAD is the crown jewel of U.S. missile defense, but it exists in small numbers. Just 7 batteries and around 800 interceptors. The Middle East conflicts forced the U.S. to deploy and use a significant portion of its THAAD stockpile to protect Israel, consuming up to 20% of its global inventory in days. This single deployment created a massive hole in U.S. strategic reserves, leaving other regions less protected. Replacing these interceptors is slow and costly. $18 million each, years to produce. The Pentagon faces an impossible choice. Use its best systems now, or risk being unprepared for a future, larger conflict. The rapid drawdown of THAAD is a stark warning of how quickly America's future security can be mortgaged. America's defense industry simply cannot build complex munitions fast enough to replace what's being used. Decades of just-in-time, small-batch production have left the U.S. unprepared for today's demands. Modern missiles require thousands of components from hundreds of suppliers. A delay in any part can halt production. There's also a shortage of skilled labor, as much of the workforce retired or left after the Cold War. Even with increased funding, ramping up production is slow. Patriot missile output may rise, but not nearly fast enough to cover current shortfalls. Lead times are long, and it will take years to rebuild stockpiles. The industrial squeeze exposes a fundamental weakness in Western defense preparedness. The U.S. Navy faces its own acute missile shortage, a challenge that has grown more urgent as global tensions rise and demands on American naval power increase. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the backbone of maritime defense, are firing off missiles faster than they can be replaced. Each launch depletes the Navy's limited stockpiles, and the pace of operations is outstripping the ability of industry to keep up. The Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group alone expended nearly 300 missiles in just a few months, an unprecedented rate that highlights the intensity of modern naval warfare and the strain it places on logistics. Reloading ships is a slow, complex process that often takes them out of action for days at a time. Meanwhile, the Navy's vertical launch system cells are short by about 3,000 missiles for full fleet readiness, a gap that leaves ships vulnerable. This deficit limits the Navy's ability to sustain combat operations and respond to new crises, forcing commanders to make tough choices about where to deploy their most capable ships. Requests from allies, like Ukraine's call for Tomahawks, add to the strain. With under 4,000 Tomahawks in stock and production lines moving slowly, the U.S. is hesitant to share these critical weapons, even with close partners. The Navy is entering an era of heightened risk with increasingly shallow magazines, where every missile counts and shortages could have real consequences in a crisis. The relentless operational tempo at sea, combined with slow replacement and growing global threats, means the Navy is sailing with dangerously low reserves, raising urgent questions about future readiness and America's ability to project power across the world's oceans. While the U.S. is stretched thin, China is watching and calculating. The missile shortage is no secret, and Beijing sees a strategic opportunity. In a Taiwan conflict, the U.S. could expend over 5,000 long-range missiles in weeks, far more than current stockpiles or production can support. If China believes the U.S. will run out of munitions quickly, the deterrent effect is weakened, raising the risk of miscalculation. China's military-industrial complex is built for mass production, while the U.S. struggles to keep pace. The missile crisis is not just logistical, it's a direct threat to Indo-Pacific stability. In a future conflict, the U.S. could be outmatched not by technology, but by sheer industrial capacity. Fixing the missile shortage demands more than money. It requires a fundamental shift in strategy. Multi-year contracts and funding are helping defense contractors expand, but rebuilding takes time. The Pentagon must strengthen fragile supply chains, invest in redundancy, and support smaller component makers. Innovation is key. Developing lower-cost interceptors and new technologies like directed energy weapons can help correct the cost imbalance. Modern manufacturing techniques can speed up production, but rebuilding stockpiles will still take years. The current global landscape offers no respite. Demands on America's arsenal are likely to grow. The missile shortage is a wake-up call, exposing a critical flaw in U.S. security. Swift, decisive action to rebuild the arsenal is now a strategic imperative for peace and stability.